What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So the other day I was able to check out Scream 7, the latest entry in the long-running and probably should have ended a while ago Scream franchise. Quick point of reference, I have been reviewing, if you guys have been keeping up, all 6 Screams leading up to this film. If you've noticed, I've enjoyed all of them to varying degrees. I mean, the first one's one of my probably top 20 favorite films of all time, and the other ones range from very good to decent, so I don't think there's a bad film in the bunch, but I will say Scream 7 is probably the weakest, maybe. I kind of go back and forth with the 6th movie, but before I get further into it, this is going to be a spoiler-free review, so it's not going to be like the other Scream reviews, Scream reviews that I did, since they've already been out a while. Since I know not everyone has had a chance to go see this film yet, I'll keep it completely spoiler-free. I'm going to talk about one thing that might be considered a light spoiler if you're not caught up with all the cast of this movie, even though it was kind of announced a while ago. And when that happens, I'll definitely warn you guys. But yeah, just kind of jumping right into it here. This is definitely the most divisive Scream film that I think we've gotten, probably at least since maybe Scream 5, if not like Scream 3. I mean, this, the RT score itself, I think it's like at a 35% critic rating and a 77% audience rating last I checked. So the audience seems to be enjoying it more than the critics, but the general consensus is that this is definitely one of the weaker entries. And personally, I would have to agree. That said, there are some pros to this that I'm going to get into first because I like to keep it upbeat and positive. And one of the biggest positives here would be Neve Campbell. Now, I'm going to get into later why I kind of feel like the Sidney Prescott arc, they kind of don't really have anything else to do with this character, I feel like, after the 7th one and the way that it ends. However, I will say, Neve Campbell's performance as Sidney Prescott is by far her best performance as this character to date. Like, I love especially the chemistry with her teenage daughter. Tatum is her name. Their mother-daughter dynamic is just genuine, heartfelt, and it also grows Sidney's character, as a person in this movie. And so you really just see the maturity that this character has evolved throughout the films as, and it's really cool to see. So I think this is by far Neve Campbell's best performance as Sidney. And kind of moving on from that, I think the first 2 acts of this movie are actually kind of solid. Like, they're not bad. And I will say they do contain 2 of, I think, some big standout Ghostface sequences. Seems like a common rule ever since at least the 5th Scream movie that we have to have at least 2 really cool sequences involving a Ghostface chase. This one would involve a escape through the walls kind of scene. I think they showed a little bit of it in the trailer where these 2 characters are trying to escape from the safe and kind of being on one side of the wall, on the inside of the wall, and then Ghostface is on the outside trying to stab through and get them. And the way it's shot, the way that it's handled, and the tension that's built throughout the scene is really well done. And then kind of going off of that, I think there's another scene where one of the characters, again, I don't want to say who and kind of keep it as vague as possible so it takes you by surprise, but one of the characters gets locked in a safe and this other character is on the phone trying to tell this other character how to use a gun, and Ghostface is trying to get in. And I think that too was a really great moment as well that really kind of ratcheted up the tension and gave us a really riveting scene as well. And kind of talking about Ghostface, there are some pretty gnarly kills once again. Ever since the 5th movie onward, they've really ratcheted up the violence in this. Maybe a little too much at times, but hey, at least this film doesn't have any groin shots, eye stabs, or neck stabs, which those are like my big 3. I don't do those, and I'm not usually a squeamish guy when it comes to violence in movies. But there is one in particular. I think there was one where like this guy gets hung on a hook, and that one was a little hard to watch. But outside of that, they're pretty brutal and gnarly without, I think, going too overboard. Like, they're not the Terrifier films, as I always say. But with that said, I do have to go into the cons, and I think the biggest con here is, while, like I said, the first 2 acts, they're by far, again, it's not the best Scream at any given point, but they are solid. They're entertaining enough. But I think the 3rd act, by the time you get to that, it just really falls apart. It involves, I think, the 2 worst Ghostface reveals that, yeah, they're, once again, who you kind of least expect, but at the same time, they feel the least earned. They feel like they don't really have a lot of They don't really have a lot of build-up, and so it's just overall very underwhelming. And their motivations are just flat out, especially this one Ghostface character. That motivation for said character is just really dumb and out there, and I'm kind of like, alright, I know there's some psychopaths in the world that would do dumb stuff like this, but I don't really see this happening. Like, you're really forcing yourself at this point is how I felt. And this is where I'm going to hold up a finger here, and I'm going to say this is a light spoiler for those of you who were not aware of this certain actor in this movie. I'm going to touch on it slightly because I kind of have to, because it's a big negative and another big reason, maybe even the biggest reason why the third act doesn't work for me. So I'm going to keep my finger up here, so mute the video, fast forward, and when you see it come down, you'll be good to resume the video. Matthew Lillard. They've confirmed in the cast that he was going to come back. I think for the first, again, the 2/3 of the movie where he kind of pops up, it's done really well, and you kind of buy into the fact that, oh, he's returned, and this could be really cool. And while by technicality he has technically returned, and Matthew Lillard is technically in this film, and this is really all I can say without going into full-blown spoilers, which I want to avoid, they find a really dumb way to completely screw up everything they built up in the first two acts concerning Matthew Lillard's character. And I know some people are going to try to defend it, but I think they really set themselves up to where they could have easily progressed this character where a lot of us thought he was going to go, but they don't. And it just really falls flat, and we feel like we got the worst version of the third act that we could have possibly gotten. But yeah, so moving on from that into, some definitely non-spoiler stuff. There's less meta-commentary here than in Scream 6, which if you saw my review for that film, you'll remember me saying that I felt that Scream 6 really lost a lot of the meta-commentary value that made it impactful and, really made this franchise stand out amongst the other slashers. Like, this has barely any. There's like one very brief scene and where they start to kind of say something meta and then it gets interrupted. And there's a couple references to, Overdone, Final Girl, and Sydney. But other than that, don't go in expecting as strong a meta commentary as pretty much any of the other films. And, also, I'm going to say one of the weakest parts of this movie actually involved Gale herself. She does return in this movie, which isn't a spoiler if you've seen the trailers. And I think the way they handle her, they give her some really good emotional arcs, but at the same time, I'm watching Gale come back, and I feel like this girl has to have some of the most plot armor of any character in cinema history. I mean, okay, the sixth movie, I can kind of buy why she'd happen to be in New York, because in the fifth movie, they make a reference to it. So, it's pushing it a little, but it kind of makes sense. But here, she just randomly shows up with two of the characters from Scream 6, and it just, in my opinion, makes absolutely zero sense whatsoever. It's kind of, because they're not even back in Woodsboro, I believe the town's name is, like where the other films have been, except for Scream 6. So it's just like, okay, you're really pushing it, and it just feels like fan service just to be fan servicey, as opposed to actually having a good reason and a good motivation for Gale being where she is. And to be fair, that's kind of an issue with these movies in general, because unlike Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers, or Art the Clown, even some of these other well-known slasher films and slasher villains, whatever you want to call them, they're much more supernatural, demonic, whatever you want to describe it as. So it makes sense why those characters would keep coming back. With the Ghostface reveals, I mean, yes, there's stuff like copycats and such that they've touched on in these movies, but I feel like you are kind of pushing it, and that's why I kind of feel like the Scream franchise needs to really quit while it's still kind of ahead, because they're really starting to push the whole Ghostface aspect and how he keeps coming back to almost an absurd level. And I say this as someone who's enjoyed pretty much all of these films, but that's just another thing I wanted to point out there. And then last but not least, I of course have to touch on the elephant in the room, that of course being Melissa Barrera and Jenna Ortega's absence in this film. Of course, as you know, Melissa Barrera got fired for having a political belief that, whether or not I agree with her actual belief itself, is irrelevant. I don't believe anybody should be fired just for having an opinion, unless it straight up is calling for violence against a group of people. So, she had an opinion on a certain war that was going on a few years ago. Paramount fired her, and then Jenna Ortega, to stand in solidarity with her, she quit as well. And I feel like, as such, you can really tell watching Scream 7 that this movie was supposed to be focused on them, and their journey was supposed to continue. And if you've seen the end of Scream 6, they were probably going to take Melissa Barrera's character especially into some really dark or conflicting, almost Anakin Skywalker-like plot points in this movie, potentially. And you really feel when you're watching this film that we got a weaker version of that. I mean, again, I had a decent enough time with Scream 7, but just watching this movie, I feel like we were robbed of what could have been a much better and much deeper, even potentially a much more meta version of what we got in Scream 7. And, you know, maybe to that point, that's why we didn't get a lot of not social commentary, meta commentary, I should say, on, you know, movies, horror genres, because they probably had something really cool to do with Melissa and Jenna. When they don't show up, they have to completely redo everything, and they're probably just trying to get a script together, and that's why they're like, oh crap, let's bring back Neve Campbell as Sidney. Does it work? Kind of, for the most part. I mean, my issues with the film aren't really with the Sidney character, but I feel like where it ends now, either they bring Melissa back for kind of one last hurrah and give Scream a finale and just let it be at that point, or just end it here and call it a day. But overall, I know it seems like I've been down on this film, but I did enjoy it. Again, I think Neve Campbell gives her best performance as Sidney. I think there's some great side characters. I really enjoyed her daughter Tatum, and I think she's a solid, not really final girl, but a solid secondary lead. And, you know, I think that there are some really good Ghostface kills and chase sequences. It's just overall, I think the third act kind of undoes the movie quite a bit. And then there's also just some, you know, the typical dumb horror movie tropes that at this point feel like they're not even trying to poke fun at it. And stuff like certain characters appearing for literally no reason other than so the plot of the movie can happen. But all that to say, I will give this movie a 6 out of 10 overall. I think it's a fine film. I think if you've liked all the other Scream films, you'll have a fun enough time with this movie, as I did. But it's definitely not going to be a Scream that I go back and watch super often. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got for today, guys. That's my thoughts on Scream 7. So let me know in the comments down below what you all thought of this film. Have you seen it? Do you plan on seeing it? And what's your favorite Scream movie? And, you know, tell me how wrong I am in the comments down below, or give your ranking of all the Scream movies. I think if I had to do a quick ranking from best to worst, I would say obviously the first film, and then I'd say in second place the fifth movie, then the fourth film, and then probably two. Which one am I missing? Two. Then the third one, and then Scream 6 and Scream 7. So that would be kind of my rough ranking, more or less. But just let me know in the comments down below. And as always, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. And I'll catch you all later.